welcome back to The Unconventional Truth. This is the podcast where we talk about how your great granddaddy probably didn't come through Ellis Island, may not have come here legally, and maybe you came and you done stole the land. Yeah, it doesn't make people feel very good. But today we're going to discuss whose America is it anyway, mostly because this is kind of like the reigning topic of this particular administration that we live under right now. But we need to talk about it. We need to talk about how we got here, what's common, different groups of people came different ways. And discussing that is kind of going to help people understand that they may not be that different than the people that live around them or the people that are being rounded up by immigration right now. Many of us are not far removed from an origin country. And our process here may not have passed today's test of legality. And I think we, especially people of my complexion, have got to understand that they are not special and that they, too, there's a lot of people coming across a border. It may have looked different, but it's for very similar reasons. So, one of the things that kind of irks me to a degree, it's not really, I shouldn't say irks me, I should say I think is something that most people should have some sort of responsibility and understanding, is where you come from, how long you've been here, how you got here. Because there's so many people out there not understanding or fully appreciating where they come from. And some of it is because they cannot. And that's why it kind of bugs me. As a white person, I have the ability to be able to map out my genealogy relatively easily. The people of color around me are not always able to do that. So it's actually a privilege to be able to see where you come from, because you were not abducted from your home country and brought here. We came here willingly. So there's that part of it. But also, it's just understanding that many times the same motivations repeat over and over again in history. It's almost always famine or starvation or economic depression that brings people here, that actually uproots them from their homes. And I feel that if you have an ancestral tie, then you can kind of understand the way that it unfolded. Not everybody's family came here because they had to. Some of them came here because they were colonizers, and that's a whole other ball of wax. One of the other things that I feel like people should have an appreciation of is what types of people their ancestors were. The reason for that is because of the epigenetics of it all. So there's times in history that we carry that can influence our gene pool in future generations. And that influence is called epigenetics. So we tend to see it like potato famine, okay? People of Irish descent tend to have a little bit more weight on them because their ancestors had starved. It's a survival mechanism. And that's just one example. There are so many other ways that epigenetics kind of shows itself. There's some thought and some people feeling that MAGA is like an epigenetics reboot of the Southern Confederate States. There might be some truth to that. It's hard to say. I don't know, nor would I want to put that on anybody, but you might want to, looking at your own family history might be able to reveal some of that. But likewise, there's a lot of people who did some really amazing things before and during slavery times. Not every person of my complexion was interested in owning people. I descend directly from one who had absolutely no interest in owning anybody. As soon as she got or inherited her father's plantation, this is Elvira Townsend, she freed her slaves. One became a senator. So that was not everybody's jam. That was a very specific type of person. And, the thing about this is that when you have a personal tie to the history of places, people, things, and situations, you tend to appreciate the situation for what it is, and you tend to appreciate that there are more than one viewpoint. You tend to have a vested interest in that situation. And, things like, slavery and the Holocaust happening again, we all have a vested interest in preventing that from happening. And one of the things that I fear we are removing from the discussion in schools is the visceral reaction that you should feel. You should feel bad about what happened in World War II, or should affect you to a degree. Why? So things like Alligator Alcatraz, so that their merch doesn't take off, Yeah, it's a little bit... Like, when I saw they had merch, I was like, are you... What? So that's, but that's where I'm coming from, is like, I'm German. Do you think that I wanted to see that? No. That to me is horrific. What, do we all have Dachau shirts? I don't understand why we would want that, because we don't. And same with, with slavery. The fact that the POTUS is soft launching, possibly having people taking ownership for people. What? What? Yeah. These are the reasons why we all should have some appreciation of the things that happened and where we came from and what role our ancestors may or may not have played. Another big role in all this, too, is immigration status and when people came. Okay, so if your family came before 1790, there was no Ellis Island for you to come through. So you just kind of showed up, which by today's standards would mean that all of us who are at that point are undocumented. Yeah. So the thing about this is that is an incredibly fluid process. And it all depends on what time your family showed up and when, and if we needed you. So I feel like people sitting on their high horse for this discussion are not realizing that they very well could have been an undocumented person. For example, my own family, this has happened, okay? So my mom's dad's side, so my maternal grandfather, his side, his line is from Germany, okay? They're the German line. Okay, I'm at my cousin's house. I don't remember why I was there, but I was. And we were having dinner, I think. Something. I don't know. I want to say it was the holidays. It doesn't really matter, but either way. Somebody asked, my great uncle was still alive at this point. His name was Don. So Uncle Don's there. And somebody said something, and Uncle Don's like, yeah, you should have heard what happened to Garnet's grandmother, Garnet being my great aunt who had passed away by this point. And we're like, what do you mean what happened with Garnet's grandma? And he's like, oh yeah, Henrietta, which by the way, I had been looking at Henrietta in our tree and trying to figure out where this woman's parents were, could not figure them out. So I had been working on this, couldn't figure it out. And Uncle Don's like, yeah, Henrietta's parents just set her on a boat, sent her here. What? She was like 12, 11 years old, something like that. And her parents had put her on a boat because they had already lost a child to starvation in Germany at this point. This is like, I want to say right before the Weimar Republic. It was like 1880, 1890. So from what I understand, there was a famine at that time. It didn't last super long, but it was an actual thing. And so they sent her here. And then basically they would get enough money up and send another kid. And I think they sent 3 or 4 children here. Pretty sure that was a little less than legal, but it's funny because I found it ironic because that's the same part of the family that was like yelling about illegal immigration. And I'm just like, well, pot meet kettle. 'Cause yeah, that was also a thing we did. So, I feel that knowing your own origin in this country is crucial. It is really crucial to understand your role, how you got here, what you're doing here, what's going on. And, I mean, not everybody's families is going to be super relevant to history, but they did something. They had children, they created a life, and that life is still valid. As long as they didn't do things that hurt people, of course, that life is valid. A lot of us, too, were border crossers and didn't maybe know that. Sometimes you see that where somebody will immigrate and then they will come through Canada. It's happened a couple times in certain points in history with certain ethnicities because maybe they couldn't get direct access to the United States. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times people's family is not as far removed as they think it is from immigration status and from coming here. But yeah, it's just, to me, it's always been kind of an amazing thing that, I never understood a controversial border stance because we have always been a melting pot. We only benefit from that melting pot. And it just adds to the richness of our country. And for people to get so upset and be so, like, I do understand vetting people coming across the border, but I feel that this has been something that we have always done and we have always used, and we have always been the land of freedom and opportunity, and basically turning our back on that is probably going to be one of the biggest mistakes our country has ever made. So, one of the other things about this entire topic is also kind of where you're from, right? So, and I really experienced that when we moved. I grew up in Ohio for the most part. And when I think I was 13, we moved to Connecticut. And that's where I spent the majority of my high school and college years, like all of it. That's where I was educated. And one of the things that was, I think, one of the most enlightening things that I got to experience and helped me appreciate other cultures besides my own was living in an area so diverse with people of all different ethnicities as New England is. Now, New England can have its own issues. I'm not denying that. But so many times you see people coming from wherever part of the world that family is from and coming usually right there and staying there for an amount of time. And the amount of different cultures, the amount of different foods that I've tried, the amount of everything. One of the reasons why my husband takes me to a particular restaurant is because they have Northern Italian cuisine, and he knows that the Italians that I knew when I lived in Connecticut happened to be Northern Italians, and their cuisine is very unique. So it's one of those things that, having that cultural experience and getting away from the area of the country that all of my family was from was really eye-opening. And experiencing directly, even if it's just like the descendants of in the first and second generations of a different type of culture than your own, way eye-opening. Like, it was one of those experiences that I am so vastly thankful that I got the chance to do, because I don't know that I would have come away from and during my education understanding and appreciating other people's cultures as much as I do. And that's just because of the exposure. That's one of the things that I feel like we are so focused on assimilation in certain parts of the country that we do not get the chance to experience it. And it becomes like this, special thing, when it should be something that we should have a common ground and should be experiencing on a much more frequent basis. And I feel like unless you've been to the East Coast or to another part of the country where a lot of people come through, and they, like, maybe even the Texas area might have the same situation, you're not going to understand and see somebody else's culture as in depth and get to appreciate it as well. Because to me, it's still one of those things that the people next door to us, when they moved in, they also were playing reggaeton music, which where I grew up in Connecticut, I went to college in New Britain. And if you lived anywhere near there, you know what college I went to. Anyway, it's the only one there. Anyway, you can roll down your window at any point in that city and literally hear, and it's like, it's nice because like right now, until a certain group of people find out where, I happen to live around a lot of Hispanic people, and it's actually, to me, comforting because I'm so used to it, and I missed it in ways I didn't think I would. It sounds weird, I know, but you have to remember the Midwest is largely just a black and white situation, and that's really, you don't have a lot of people of different ethnic backgrounds. You're starting to, but you don't usually see it like you do back east. And so, like, to me, I'm like, oh my God, yes! Like, I mean, like, and yeah, it's one of those things that I definitely have learned to appreciate other people's cultures and love learning about it. And to me, it's just so mind-blowing that we wouldn't want to. Call me naive. I don't know. So, one of the big ways that this whole theme, that immigration and having people come into our country, there's one kind of viewpoint or umbrella that gets weaponized over and over again, and it's happened time after time, and that is basically this whole real American myth, this whole idea that a certain type of person or a certain religious belief or a certain, it doesn't fucking matter, somebody will be the real American in the room, right? Isn't really based on much, but so, and we see that even now because earlier, I want to say it was last week, J.D. Vance gave a speech at the Clarion Institute, and basically what he wanted, or what he proposed in this speech and what he talked about, was tying your eligibility as an American to your ancestors' service in the Civil and the Revolutionary War. My thoughts on that, I'm going to be very honest. One of the things that I really enjoyed seeing during Independence Day this year, during the 4th of July, was there was a video going around TikTok, and it was in the room where the Declaration of Independence was signed. It was the direct descendants from the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, and it was the direct descendants of, so his nieces, nephews, grandchildren, right? What strikes me about that video is how diverse those people are. So if we're tying something to Revolutionary and Civil War service, what are you supposed to do to prove that you're an American then? Are you supposed to like unfurl a family tree? Like, what the hell? Like, how would you go about even proving any of that? And this has literally been a label that we have thrown around time after time, and it has actual consequences for certain groups of people. Previously, it was Native Americans, especially the Cherokee. They weren't real Americans, so they forced them on the Trail of Tears and forced them across the country to Oklahoma. And a lot of them died on the way. And now we're seeing it again. It seems like every 100 years or so, we see some immigration crisis somewhere in the world, and it's happened here more than we like to talk about. It's happened with the Trail of Tears. It's happening again right now with the removal of people who are determined to be, illegal or undocumented, and that's not always the case, as we're hearing. But it also could have been, people of Japanese heritage were held in internment camps during World War II. Like, this has happened far too often, and it's almost always this whole myth of what a real American is. So knowing your origin story is crucial in times like this. Understanding that who you're related to, what their mark was on history is crucial. Because if you don't learn these things, you're doomed to repeat them. In fact, you're probably higher genetics, or your epigenetics dictates it's more likely to happen because you're related to them. But it's part of your responsibility as an American and as somebody that is trying to actively prevent it. Appreciating and understanding at least some of your origin story, I think, is one of the great equalizers of our society, because people tend to realize really, really fast that they are not special, and that maybe their loved ones and their ancestors did some horrific shit, and that's not your fault, but you have to learn from that. Like, one of the things that I've been working on in my own tree is determining, because my same grandma from the previous story, right? Her name was Henrietta. Okay. So I'm trying to find out if Henrietta is related to, her last name was Hooker, which it's spelled H-O-C-H or H-O-C-K-E-R in German with an umlaut over the O. But anyway, pretty sure the commandant of Auschwitz was, his last name was the same. I don't know if we're related. I'm trying to find that out. I can't even find her family in Germany. So this is, and I've been working on my own tree for 20 years. It's not a fast process, but it's a necessary process. And one of the things that I find very humbling is I've had family members say, like, that they approve something, and it's really easy to humble them quick, fast, and in a hurry when you tell them about that, because, yeah, that happened with us too. Yeah. Most of us have somebody in our past that we're not proud of. That's the person that you need to understand. That's the person that you need to look at, and that's the person that you shouldn't shy away from. We all have that one. Every tree's got it. And knowing that it exists, knowing who they are, what their motivations were, is how we prevent some of this egregious shit from happening over and over again. Because unless we learn the history, we are doomed to repeat it. And that is coming back hard right now. Yeah, it's one of those that it's utterly painful to me seeing this play out in front of us, and it be something that has happened here, and people have forgotten about it. So that's it for tonight. But yeah, I challenge everybody to, at some point in your life, figure out on some level where you come from and who you're related to, and do your best to take that information and learn the most that you can from it. It is not a quick thing. What I highly recommend is, start an Ancestry account, work on it for a little bit, take a break, wait 3 or 4 to 6 months, come back, start it up, work on it for a couple months, take a break, because you can't do this for 20 straight years. It's very boring work. I'm going to tell you right now. It is literally going through the census and being like, oh, yep, there's Amos. You know what I mean? That's what it is. So it's not the most fun thing, but it's crucial work. It is valid and it is crucial. And that is how we can teach our children the atrocities that had happened time and time again, and hopefully stop it from happening once and for all. So have a wonderful night, and we will see you next time on the Unconventional Truth Podcast with me, April Hagler Jackson.